Muscle cars, the ultimate American take on performance. Why would you make it so complicated with twists and turns when all you need is going into a straight line as fast as possible on a drag strip or maybe even at your local intersection when the police aren't looking? Welcome everyone to episode 81 of the Automotive History series, which is a 3-part definitive guide to the muscle car wars of the 1960s. And this is part 2, the golden age of the muscle car craze. As I explained in the first part, the American quest for performance really started to take off in the 1950s. 2 cylinders were added to straight sixes, turning them into V8s, and horsepower, displacement and acceleration battles produced some low-priced pocket rockets, but mostly high-speed expensive bankers' hot rods. The closing chapter of the decade has to be the 1958 Mercurys with the Super Marauder option, pushing the horsepower numbers to a magical barrier-breaking 400 horsepower. A definitive answer to the horsepower wars? Maybe, but the race was far from over. See, for most car makers, car racing is an integral part of doing business. Some make their money by developing race cars exclusively and race them, and sell a few of them on the side as a sports car or a grand tourer to fund these racy shenanigans. But other, usually large and established car makers race some of their cars in order to gain publicity. It's no big business for them, just another side hustle. But remember, what wins on Sunday sells on Monday. By the start of the 1960s, American car makers further developed their race and performance programs, building high-speed performance editions of regular passenger cars. These companies then used or sold these cars for 2 types of customers: the professional racing scene and the semi-professional teams or amateur hour. The first one is where the American car companies competed in such events like stock car racing, and the second one is where the cars were also sold to individuals, usually in very limited numbers. Now, these cars were downright scary and dangerous to drive on city streets, so most of them were bought by amateur or semi-professional racing teams. Often, these cars were just the template for them, like a blank canvas, and they'd modify them even more to compete in various divisions and series at the track or the drag strip. In the meantime, sportiness developed to become a new theme that could be used to style cars. But this time it wasn't exclusively to the rich and famous, but targeted at young folks. Sports editions were spread across all the divisions and lineups, regardless of car size and car price. Sportiness pretty much came in 2 versions: sporty performance, so actual sportiness, and just sporty looks. The latter is simply an appearance package, so nothing was changed under the hood. For the average American, sportiness meant 2 separate bucket seats instead of a good old front bench, a center console and a floor-mounted shifter, preferably attached to an automatic transmission because nothing screams sportiness more than not shifting the car yourself, right? Marketing departments quickly figured these sporty appearance packages sold well to this new demographic, the youth, especially on this new range of compact and mid-sized cars that were originally intended and designed to be fuel-efficient economy cars with a low retail price. GM figured the Monza package worked well on the Chevrolet Corvair, and Ford introduced the Futura and the Sprint package for the compact Ford Falcon. And then there are the real sporty cars where the performance was cranked up to 11. Because when you can outfit your largest land yachts with a massive engine, then why wouldn't you shove those bad boys in mid-size and compact cars for even faster straight-line performance? The power stays, but the weight of the car drops. Essentially the recipe for a muscle car. Although these cars were street legal, they were almost exclusively built for the drag strip. In 1962, the Chrysler Corporation developed the Max Wedge engine option for the mid-sized Dodge and Plymouth models, which happened to be downsized full-sizers to make matters even more confusing. Engine sizes were bumped up to 426 cubic inch or 7 liters. Remember when I talked about that magical number of 400 horsepower? Yeah, forget about that, because we're going over it, reaching as much as 425 horsepower, thanks to a ludicrous 13.5 to 1 compression ratio. The Max Wedge engines were installed in Dodge Darts and was nicknamed the Ram Charger, and in Plymouth Furies nicknamed the Superstocks. Ford in the meantime launched its Total Performance Era ad campaign. Racing was a central theme, as Ford not only contended in American racing but also European racing with such cars like a GT40. Back home, Ford introduced the Thunderbolt package that was installed on the mid-sized Fairlane by shoving the big 7-liter of the full-size Galaxy into it. The 7-liter or 427 cubic inch was exactly the same in size as the Chrysler Max wedge engines, and this one also produced 425 horsepower, although it was rumored actual power was closer to an earth-shattering 500 horsepower. Where does it stop? Well, nowhere, according to Ford, as they also installed ever-growing engines in their smallest cars, like the Ford Falcon and its sister, the Mercury Comet. The Falcon, upon launch a basic econo box, praised for its economical and modest 6-cylinder, but in 3 years' time it was given a V8 with a displacement of 4.7 liters, double that of the smallest engine that was otherwise available. Eventually the Falcon was given a sporty coat to wear, becoming the Mustang. And then there was General Motors, but here's where it gets interesting. GM already offered a few high-performance cars, like the Super Sport or SS package for regular Chevrolets. And then there was Pontiac that had been hard at work at rebranding itself as the Sporty Performance Division within GM's family of fine cars, with the white Trek Drive models and sports editions of regular Pontiacs, such as the 1962 Pontiac Catalina Super Duty 421, with a confirmed 405 horsepower. But a rumored number that went over 450. Where does it stop? But all these cars had in common that they were full-size cars and not mid-sizers, which defines a muscle car. But then something happened. In a long and confusing story, GM decided to quit stock car racing altogether and impose an engine limit on mid-sized cars. Word on the street was that it was a result of an antitrust investigation set up by the US government. Whichever story you believe, GM effectively killed any sporty aspirations in 1963, completely undermining Pontiac's advertisement strategy as a sporty division. How are you able to sell cars on Monday when they are forbidden to win on Sunday? This engine limit meant that all mid-sized and compact cars made by GM could only have engines with sizes up to 330 cubic inch or 5.4 liters, but not more. 330 cubic inch is a lot smaller than the 427s Chrysler and Ford were playing around with at the time with the mid-sized cars, and this didn't sit well with a few Pontiac engineers. While working on the upcoming mid-sized Le Mans model, they figured that the engine bay could fit the larger 389 cubic inch or 6.4 liter V8 from the full-size Pontiacs into it. They shoved the engine into the car, played around with it, and saw that all was right in the world, except that this performance version would never come to life. The 389 would be 59 cubic inches too big to comply with GM's engine limit. Or is it? After carefully reading the GM rulebook for a 5th time, the engineers found a loophole. It was stated that the engine limit of 330 cubic inches was only applied to base engines. But this wasn't going to be a base engine, this was going to be an optional engine. So the rules wouldn't apply, and this option became known as that 3-lettered word, GTO. Gran Turismo Omologato.
And now for something especially exciting, the GTO option. The styling and engineering features of this option result in the finest rally-type American production car available.
And more big news. Here is the GTO option engine. Built up from the regular 389 cubic inch block, this Husky Charger turns out 325 horses at 4,800 RPM. It produces a thundering 428 pounds-feet of torque at 3,200 RPM.
The engine was part of the GTO performance package, available on the mid-size Pontiac Le Mans and Tempest, and without setting off too many alarms, quietly shipped 5,000 of these cars to interested dealers. By the time GM's management learned about this cubic inch coup, the engineers replied, "Tough luck there, buddy, they're already on the showroom floor." The 1964 Pontiac GTO, by many regarded the very first true muscle car, and we can roll the credits from here. edsautoreviews proudly presents Ed's Automotive Art Emporium, the official merch store. That's right, over at Ed's Emporium, you can find the finest in automotive art made by yours truly. Whether it's a plate you want to hang on your wall in your home or garage, or magnets and stickers that you want to stick on the rear bumper of your classic ride, or expand your wardrobe with some car-themed apparel, I'm sure you're gonna love these designs. All designs are made by me and my own ideas, no AI trickery involved, for classic car owners that can handle a joke, and more designs get added along the way. By buying an artwork, you get to hang something nice on your wall, and I get to work on my retirement plans. So visit your local Ed's Automotive Art Emporium by searching for edsautoreviews.dashery.com or click the link in the description and get your awesome automotive art today. The GTO released quite a stir. This car, along with Ford's Mustang, showed that there was an unquenchable thirst by the American youth for affordable speed and power. A new market started to take shape, that of the so-called supercar. Now, high-performance cars were no longer only sold to professional racing and amateur hour. The average man could enjoy a big engine in a small car. Car makers started to develop new models specifically for this new market segment. And from here, the floodgates were wide open. Within GM, the engine limit for mid-size cars was raised from 330 to 400 cubic inches, and all divisions besides Pontiac didn't know how fast they needed to develop their own muscle car. Oldsmobile introduced the 442 Performance Edition for the mid-size Cutlasses with a 400 cubic inch or 6.5 liter V8 in 1965. Buick introduced the Grand Sport package for their mid-size Skylark models with a 401 cubic inch V8, also in 1965. This technically means that this engine was 1 cubic inch over the limit, but the engine was referred to as the Buick 400, so alright, fine. Since luxury division Cadillac stayed away from this childish horsepower race, the Buick was turned in somewhat of a luxury muscle car, a gentleman's hot rod. Chevrolet started to offer the SS package on the mid-size Chevelles, with engines going as big as 396 V8 in 1966. And so the other American car makers jumped into it as well. Ford introduced high-performance editions on the Mustangs, like the Boss 302, the Shelby GT500, and the 428 Super Cobra Jet. This also shows that pony cars can be muscle cars, but muscle cars can never be pony cars. AMC entered the race with the AMX and a sports version of the AMC Rebel, called the Machine. Yes, not a machine, not one of the machines, nope. The Machine. And Chrysler introduced various muscle cars like the Dodge Charger and the Plymouth Cuda. Now, as much as boomer memories in Hollywood like you to believe every teenager in the US in the 60s had a muscle car back in high school, the truth is that it is simply not true. This wasn't until the 1980s and 90s when most of these cars were cheap beaters, but that's a story for a different time. Much like the overpowered muscle cars in recent years, these cars weren't overly expensive but not cheap either. Besides their massive engines, these sports editions or sports packages were often well appointed. Most muscle cars went for around $5,000, which would be around $50,000 by today's standards, or roughly a mid-trim Ford Mustang. Not according to Chrysler, as they screamed to hell with it by introducing a subcategory of muscle cars, the affordable muscle car, the budget racer. Twice the power for half the price, double the fun. Chrysler introduced the Plymouth Roadrunner as a low-cost alternative to the GTX, and Dodge was given the Super B as kind of like an alternative to the Charger. What did you get? Absolutely nothing, but an oversized and overpowered engine, a steering wheel, a seat, and a thin layer of hopes and prayers that you don't wrap yourself around the next tree, as brakes, suspension, and any road feel whatsoever were practically optional. But these strip powerhouses came with an advantage. Its overall weight was lower, further improving acceleration. Chrysler bought the usage rights of the image and name Roadrunner from Warner Brothers for the modest sum of $50,000 and included the typical beep beep, beep beep, beep, thank you, sounding horn as a party trick. On some versions you could even get a pistol grip shifter. Oh, America, never change. Under the hood, you'd find engines in the 7-liter range listening to such names as the Magnum, Hemi, and the almighty 440 with the 6-pack carburetor. Power output was the usual near 400 horsepower smooching party. As the years progressed after the Pontiac GTO's introduction and leading up to the 1970s, the ultimate top of the muscle car craze was reached. 1970 is often regarded as the ultimate year. About 35 model series across the industry could be identified as a muscle car with the proper performance package, and they had such fantastic names. The Camaro SS93L78, AMX 390 Go Pack, Challenger 446 Pack, 442 W30, GTO Ram Air, Cougar 428 Super Cobra Jet, and Boss 429. Where does it stop? If you wanted the cream of the crop in 1970, make sure you walk into a Chrysler, Ford, or GM showroom. Over at Chrysler and Ford, you could buy the so-called Aero Warriors, the ultimate climax of the performance orgy. Ford offered the Torino King Cobra and the Mercury Cyclone Spoiler 2. Both cars came with an aerodynamic cone-shaped nose on the front for less wind resistance. Chrysler offered a similar car as a reaction, including the Plymouth Superbird and the Dodge Charger Daytona. These were reworked Roadrunners and Chargers, but besides a cone-shaped nose, both also came with a massive wing on the rear. But as weird as these cars look, they do require some explanation. Although they are muscle cars, strictly speaking, these are really race cars, purely intended for the track and purpose-built for NASCAR stock car races. See, stock car racing is exactly what the name implies. Originally, a car maker would send their stock car, so a regular passenger car with an unaltered or slightly tuned regular production engine, to the races to see how it would compete. But over time, that approach flipped. Instead of building a regular car first and race it second, car makers such as Ford and Chrysler purpose-built track warriors and built just enough of them for the buying public as a quote-unquote regular production car to meet the threshold of what is a stock car. Usually a couple hundred cars were enough. So these straight-line missiles were really only safe to use out on the track by an experienced driver. But of course, to hell with it, as any teenager with a bit too much of daddy's money and a bit too less of solid driving experience could buy these cars straight from the dealer. General Motors did not offer such aero warriors, but trust me, if you knew the right guy at the right dealer, you could get your hands on a COPO car. COPO, or Central Office Production Order, was a term that described the process of ordering a special combination of a car model and parts that was otherwise not offered as standard or in the brochure. It was the automotive equivalent of ordering off the menu. This COPO process was mostly used by fleet services like taxis, government vehicles, and police cars, but a few savvy dealers saw a loophole by offering muscle cars with engines that were otherwise not available for this particular car. For instance, the COPO Chevrolet Chevelles and Camaros that managed to get a 427 cubic inch V8 installed into them when officially it wasn't possible because of the 400 cubic inch engine limit imposed by GM's management. Overall, the 1970 Chevrolet Chevelle SS LS6 can be regarded as the most powerful muscle car of all. With its massive 454 cubic inch or 7.4 liter V8, it had a claimed 450 horsepower output, the highest number registered of all muscle cars available. If this truly is the most powerful remains to be seen, as many of the muscle cars had power outputs that were a lot higher than what was advertised in the brochure. But this concludes the decade. Whereas at the start of the 60s, most performance cars had a V8 with a displacement of around 5 to 6 liters and between 3 and 400 horsepower, mostly sold to professionals. By the end of the decade, those numbers were further pushed closer to 7 liters and even going over that. Most car makers stopped at around 450 cubic inches, or 7.5 liters, and an equal amount of horsepower, which was between 400 and 450. These cars were still intended for the track, but started to show their growling faces more and more out on the streets, and not always in just as experienced hands. Where does it stop? Well, that's what we're going to find out in part 3.